Yes, greetings in the name of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie First and Empress Menin Asfor. My name is Jalan Inai, and welcome once more to another one of our SOSACRU webinars. This afternoon, yes, I'm particularly delighted to have our guest lecturer here, Shawn Sobers. Shawn HaileMarriam Sobers, to be exact. And we are looking forward to beginning a conversation about what is being described as New Ethiopianism, and linked to various conversations of Ethiopianism, but centering on the work of His Majesty. Shawn is an expert in this field, has done tremendous work on the time of His Majesty in the UK in particular. I know Robbie also is familiar with that space. So I'm merely here this afternoon to pass the baton, so to speak, over to Robbie. But I want to welcome all of those of you who have joined us. We see this as the first in a series of conversations where we're really asking our scholar brethren to begin to focus on interpreting His Majesty's role and place in the scholarship, ensuring that, you know, we are also contributing to how it is that His Majesty's work is understood, and particularly the way that he has afforded us a system and a way in ourselves of operating in. The visits we know around the world have motivated Rastafari and various geographies to continue to honor those days as important holy days. So this conversation starts with His Majesty's movement, looking at him primarily in the UK, but beginning to conceptualize what it is that his own example, his missions, his travel, what have those ingredients done in the whole mix of Rastafari internationalism. Before I turn over to Ras Robbie, I want to invite Queen Mother, Mama Willetti, Dr. Bursford, to just, so to speak, balance the scale and provide us with some inspiration to take us forward. Mama Willetti?
Yes, greetings, Bongo I, and greetings to everyone that is on the platform at this time. And at this time, we give thanks and aises to Kadamawi, Haile Selassie I, and Empress Ozero Menin Asfa. I are thankful, especially in these perilous times in which I exist. I ask their I find majesties to continue to plant wise mind and overstanding in I's irids, to order I's steps, and to lead I in the way that I must yard. You know, I continue to be faithful servants in the vineyard of goodness. And for these few words, I give thanks and I welcome Dr. Shawn HaileMarriam Sobers to the platform. And this is SOSACRU. This is the School of Sacrament, Rastafari University. Give thanks and aises.
Give thanks, Mama Willetti.
Give thanks.
Ras Robbie is our designated chair for today. Robbie himself, he's done some interesting work on Ba. I guess we'll hear some of that synergy as we go forward. But Ras Robbie, it's my pleasure to hand over to you. Robbie Shilliam, of course, is a professor at Johns Hopkins and a foundation board member in the SOSACRU space. I'll leave it to you to introduce Professor.
Yes, I give thanks. So Ras Shawn, it's really good to sit with the eye again. Ras Shawn, ones might know, is indelibly associated with Fairfield House. Ones might not know he's a professor of cultural interdisciplinary practice at the University of West England, a very accomplished scholar. And I think one of the really important things about the eye is the way in which the eye integrates the scholarship with the community work, Shawn. So we're really fortunate to have the eye on today. And I want to start by asking the eye a question about Fairfield House. Now, ones will know of Fairfield House as the residence of His Majesty, the only residence of His Majesty outside of Ethiopia. But I wonder if I could get into a little bit of details, because Fairfield House is near where you live, west of England. Could you give ones just a kind of a brief history of the significance of Fairfield House for? We'll get into the Rastafari trod in a minute, but for His Majesty and the family, especially the significance of this place. Give thanks.
No, give thanks. I just want to start by just saying, just give thanks for the invitation to be here today in the School of Sacrament, Rastafari University. It's a blessed and an honor, and I never take these invitations lightly. And also, yeah, just thank ones and ones that are in the space right now. And I just hope I do my best in terms of honoring the tradition and the conversation. So give thanks. Yeah, so I grew up in the city of Bath. That's my born and bred home. And I kind of want to come at it from that angle, if you like. Do you know what I mean? Before I then get into the fullness of that conversation with His Majesty, because growing up, you know, I only remember 2 times growing up where it was mentioned that His Majesty lived in Bath, because actually it wasn't spoken about. It's a very unknown element. And I'm not even saying hidden. You know, we talk about this concept of hidden history and buried, but it just wasn't known. Do you know what I mean? So even goodwill people would be like, oh yeah, you know, the Emperor of Ethiopia lived in Bath, and then that would be the end of the sentence, because they didn't know anymore. But it was just little scrabblings of kind of information. So it took a while for this you know, for the knowledge to get in its fullness. Obviously, certain ones knew. Sister Waletta Hidden knew, and she was bringing Rastafari to Bath in the 1970s, 80s. Ras Bandeli Selassie, the priest of the Southwest, knew, but it wasn't common knowledge, really. So Fairfield House, to answer your question kind of directly then. So Fairfield House is on the edge of the city, is on the west edge of the city of Bath, and is where His Majesty sought refuge when Mussolini invaded Ethiopia. Mussolini invaded Ethiopia in 1935. His Majesty fought on the front line, and there's documentation of that. But then it got to the point when they realized actually to secure Ethiopia's future, it would be important for His Majesty to come to the West and rally for wider support, because you can imagine, you know, Ethiopia, as we commonly know, is the only, you know, non-colonized country in Ethiopia. But actually that was very much on a teeter edge. If anything happened to His Majesty, if he was kind of overthrown, if you know, God forbid, Mussolini did anything in that respect, then Ethiopia would have been colonized, and then there would be no looking back. So to secure the future, it was the will of the people, and His Majesty got voted out of this because he didn't want to leave Ethiopia, but he got voted out, and then he had to come to the West for diplomatic reasons. So first he came to Jerusalem to begin with, and then he traveled into London. And there's many kind of overlapping reasons why he ended up in the city of Bath at Fairfield House. It's documented he had mustard gas burns on his hands and on his arms because Mussolini used chemical warfare. And Bath is well known for its spa treatment to treat burns, etc., etc. And it's kind of world famous. Say he had treatment here for a while. He was also recommended to come here, and it talks about that in his autobiography. So there's many overlapping, but the concept is that when he then arrived in Bath, then he started to, you know, look for what suitable premises, and Fairfield House then shone a light in terms of being an appropriate place. It's a very private house. You can't see it from the main road. it's large enough, but it's not also overwhelmingly large. And it had to deal with three overlapping functions. One, first and foremost, is a family home. His Majesty had to leave Ethiopia with his family, with Empress Menin, with his children, grandchildren. So it had to be a secure place for them because they had just come out of a place of extreme turmoil and violence. Also, it was a government home. This essentially was the Ethiopian government in exile was in this space as well. And then as it gradually evolved, it is also a very spiritual home as well. The priests were there. They built an Ethiopian Orthodox chapel, which would have been the first one outside of Ethiopia at that time. So it had these kind of three functions: family, state, and also spiritual, religious as well. And so, yeah, His Majesty was very affectionate towards Fairfield House and the city of Bath. He wrote about that in his autobiography and in his speeches, and he gives very great testament to how the city, helped him find that refuge and friendship and solidarity at this extreme time of turmoil for him. This was just, he was crowned in 1930s, as ones know. So this is just 6 years into his reign, and it gave a very long lasting impression on the rest of his leadership in Ethiopia. Very significant formative years that he kind of never forgotten, really. So yeah, really significant place. And as you say, we're getting to more how it's related to Rastafari going forward.
Sure.
But even in his own personal life, very significant time and place for His Majesty.
Could I give some just description about the area, like just what it looks like, including like the surrounding countryside, because he makes this reference in his autobiography to Harar and all that. Just so ones know.
So Bath is Bath is a city, but it's a small city, and it's surrounded by the hills. Like Bath is very famously in the valley of 7 hills, rolling hills. And His Majesty speaks about how when he looks through a particular window in Fairfield House, it reminded him of Harar, which was the area that he was governor of at the age of 14. And you still see that view today, and you compare it with certain views of Harar, and you could see it, and the hills are magnificent. So it's, like I said, it's on the edge of the city. So it is very close to the countryside, very close to kind of nature. And it's, Bath is a very beautiful place. The history of Bath is Roman and Georgian. Fairfield House itself is an Italianate villa that is built in the mid 1800s, and it was previously resident to the widow of the mayor of Belfast, lived there. And it's difficult to know exactly how many rooms it's got, because it's got kind of rooms kind of off the side and off the sort of warranted around, but it's a good sized villa, surrounded by beautiful grounds. There was stables along the long driveway that when you come into Fairfield, that was stables along there. Directly next to it is a building called Partis College, and Partis College was originally a almshouse for widows of clergy, and when their husbands, vicars, passed away, they would sell up their goods and live in this communal space. And there's a chapel in Partis College, so it's a very spiritual place, and His Majesty is known to have used that chapel before the chapel was built at Fairfield House. And it's a very peaceful place. There's a long wall that runs right alongside, around actually both sides of it at that point, but runs alongside. So it's very private and secluded. By no means is it a big showy, glitzy, show-off house. It's a very humble house. It's of significance. He bought it for £3,500 in 1935. So, but that would have been a lot of money still back then. He did have a lot of people to care for, because a lot of his entourage was in Bath, but also somewhere in London. He had children and grandchildren in schools in different parts of the country, but also parts of his government, etc., were in the United States and other parts of Europe, and he had to fund a lot of them people as well. So, he came with what he had, but he had to make it stretch a long way.
Mm.
But yeah, it's a very beautiful, beautiful, peaceful
Mm.
place, and it is like that now. So you can just imagine what it would be like back then, really.
Yes, sir. And so you did this famous documentary, right? Footsteps of the Emperor, right? Narrated by the one and only
Benjamin,
Benjamin.
yeah.
Yes.
Benjamin Anaya.
Yeah. What made one want to have to do that film? What did you want to achieve with that film?
So at that point in my life, I was working for a TV station. So I'm a film and photographer, filmmaker, photographer, and anthropologist, educational background. So at that point then in 1999, I was working at HTV television, which is essentially the Channel 3 of the British TV. Um, and part of my role was in education. I used to teach young people, production skills, etc. And then part of my role was also as a program maker. So the first program I made for television was when I was working there. That was all about youth homelessness in Bristol. Bristol's the neighbouring city to Bath, and there's a big youth homelessness thing. And that was half an hour documentary. And then I had the opportunity to pitch and put some ideas in for a next documentary. So I just thought, you know what? So I my own trod within Rastafari. I started around 1989, 1990, and then I was going to Fairfield House for bingies and various gatherings, etc. So I just thought, you know what, this story hasn't been told. I hadn't seen any real documentation on this history and on this story. So I went to the commission editor of the TV station then. This was in uh, early 1999. And I said, look, I'd like to make a documentary on the Emperor of Ethiopia living in the city of Bath. It is in a room full of people. There was other producers and that in the room as well. Because I think that's just a story that hasn't been told, and it's a fantastic story in history that's too big to remain untold. And no one in the room knew about this history. So these are well-seasoned journalists, documentary makers, do you know what I mean? And none of them knew at all. And they said, okay, well, this sounds interesting. So they said, oh, if this looks like it has legs, we'll give you half an hour. So they said, go away, research it more, bring back more information. And if it's a goer, then we'll give you half an hour slot on TV for it. So I was like, okay. So I went off. I think I had about a month or so. So I went off, found everything I could, brought it back together. I made a little sort of 30-second or minute trailer, just shot on, with a little video camera. And then I brought it back to them a month later. And it was like a dossier of information. Do you know what I mean? And they just like, wow. And they just said, we'll give you an hour of TV, not even half an hour. So, and that's kind of unheard of, really. Do you know what I mean? So they gave me two, and it actually went out on Sunday afternoon at I think it was about 5 or 6 o'clock. It was a good slot that I had in the evening. So it was 2 consecutive Sundays, 2 half an hour slots. And yeah, and so it sounds quite easy now, but actually back in the day is like, to get this off the ground.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nothing's easy. So I never want to make the things sound like
No
just
TikTok back then,
you know
right?
what I mean? No, there's no TikTok, no YouTube or nothing like that. So when I had the green light for it and they just said, yeah, and I had a budget. So every half an hour of TV came with £11,000 budget. So I had £22,000 budget to make it. So that's good. You had the support of the TV station to make this thing with the budget. So, and the first person I thought to reach out to, well, one of the first people, I can't remember exactly, obviously it's a long time now, but in terms of being involved, Benjamin Zephaniah was always at the top of the list of someone I wanted. I had previous conversations with Benjamin, even when I was a film student. I'd met him and we spoke and we're in touch because I wanted him to be involved in in a documentary that I made when I was at university. But he couldn't do it, but he rang me straight up and we had a strong reasoning about it. Do you know what I mean? That was the first time I'd met him proper. So we had always stayed in touch over 3-4 years. So I just said to him, look, Benjamin, do you know what I mean? Like, I've got this opportunity now to make this film. And he was just like, yeah, I'm in. Do you know what I mean? Just let me know when and where to be, and I'm in. So he came down to Bath and Bristol, where the TV production company was, and we just planned it and then started filming it. So it was all planned. I can't remember how long it took to make, maybe about a 3-month production period or something. And I put a small advert in, a letter to the editor in the local Bath newspaper. And it was something about, if anyone's got any memories of the emperor living in the city of Bath, I'm making a TV documentary for local TV, please get in touch. And within a week, I was flooded with letters, with information. Do you know what I mean? This is even email wasn't really even a thing back then.
And what's amazing about that film is the way in which you captured these old residents of Bath just holding forth on remembering really distinctly His Majesty and that moment in time, right?
Yeah, no, for me that was really special because Bath is a very conservative place, a very white conservative place. Growing up in the city of Bath, I was only white. Well, there was 3 other black kids in my whole year group. One of them was my cousin, very white area. So I didn't know what I was going to come back. You just put this call out there. I didn't know what I was going to get back. And then all of a sudden I had all these, elders, English elders talking about, this happened. So I went and met them all individually and contacted them and just heard their stories. Do you know what I mean? I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, we got to include that. We got to include that. And putting a film together is a bit of a patchwork jigsaw. You just find what fits the narrative, the story that you want to tell. And to go back to your early question, the thing I wanted from the documentary was to raise awareness that this special thing happened in the city, in the country that no one knows about. Do you know what I mean? So it really was light.
I mean, and this is really important, right? Because the eyes describing this, getting this patchwork to put together, right? And there is this, one of the most consequential moments in 20th century history. A really big moment in the history of 20th century Britain.
Absolutely.
And certainly a massive moment in the modern history of Ethiopia. And here's a Rastafari brethren retrieving this history and putting it together and putting it out there where no other authority is doing it, right? And it's, I get it. You're not saying it's a conspiracy. It's just, who are the ones who are retrieving these incredibly important moments in humanity?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I'll tell you what as well, like Ras Bandeli Selassie, who passed away sadly last year, has always been one of my elders, role models, mentors. You know what I mean? I started to go to his bingies when I still lived in Bath. Before I even went to university, I was going to his bingies. So I went to him early as well to say, look, Ras, elder, I've got the opportunity to make this film. What do you think? And I even said, like, am I the right person to even do it? And he is just like, you've got this platform, this opportunity. Who else is going to do it if you're not going to do it? Do you know what I mean? And it's best in your hands making it, because there's a certain sensibility that's going to come through. Do you know what I mean? So that gave me the confidence then to move through with it as well. And as you said before, the English elders telling this story is significant, because really, and there's nothing wrong with them. What I'm about to say, I don't want it to sound like there's anything wrong with it, but up to that point, we'd only ever heard about Rastafari as the individual of Rastafari, His Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie, from the voice of Rastas ourselves. So when people see that, they obviously think, oh, well, they're biased, they're Rastas, and they're going to say, to hear white English people say that are in their 60s and 70s and 80 years old, and Keith Johnson, God bless him, in the film, without prompting from me, I just said to him, look, what was your memory of the emperor when of Bath? So he was one of these people that wrote to me after seeing the thing in the newspaper. So I put the film on the camera on him without knowing really how he was going to talk about it. And talks about very powerfully that when he was in the presence of the emperor, he remembers his eyes, and he said he was in the presence of being in the presence of someone that's more than a man. You know, the
That's
man
right.
said this on camera with no prompting,
Yeah,
late 70s when he said that.
that's right.
And I
That's
was
right.
just like, wow, this is
Yeah.
more powerful than I ever even.
Every tongue shall tell.
Do you know what I mean? Just never.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's interesting as well. And you know this as a researcher. When you delve into research, you don't know what you're going to find out. Otherwise, it won't be called research, you know. And I was making this film as a documentary filmmaker, as a journalist, as a, you know. So there's a code of ethics that you have to kind of go through.
Yeah.
It wasn't until halfway through I thought, you know what, I don't know what I'm going to find out. I might find out something that I don't want to find out. I might find out some skeletons. Do you know what I mean? I
Right.
don't know
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
we're going to say. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I have to say, there was nothing that I found out which put His Majesty in a bad light, negative light, no controversies. It was all people just had nothing but goodness to say.
Right.
And even when they met him from a child or adult, whatever, he had this impression.
That's right.
The
And
only
it's, yeah,
kind of,
please.
and I was going to say that
Yeah.
one of the rumblings was about the bills because His Majesty ran out of money while he was living there. So there was this, you know, some people in Bath say, oh yeah, he didn't pay his gas bill and electric bill. Well, actually, well, no, the nanny, Ruth Haskins, she's very clear to say all bills are paid afterwards, and His Majesty settled up all them, and there was no controversy. So that was only the one glimmer of thing that I didn't.
Yeah.
Someone else.
And I mean, and this gets us to the next part of the reasoning, right? So, you know, I remember when we were doing, I see Ras Kostafari on the Zoom, and when Ras Kos and Sister Stella and Ras Shango and I was, you know, doing that exhibition in
Majesty in the Movement.
Majesty in the Movement, and then Rastafari in Motion, and it became Rastafari in Motion afterwards. One of the things that we found in the archives was reports from the taxman. So the taxman had gone over, right, because the government wouldn't receive His Majesty as a formal guest because they didn't want to cause waves with Mussolini, so he came informally. So then the question was, as an informal resident, he should be paying tax, should he not? So the taxman comes to Fairfield House and describes the reasoning and lays out what the resources are, and then has this whole part where he's saying that, you know, His Majesty insisted, despite the meager resources that he had, he insisted that he be taxed like any other person. And now we're living in this time when we got billionaires teaming up with billionaires, you know, running the world, and there's His Majesty saying, tax me like any other man, right? And this gets to the centrality of the or you know, like, it seems to me like the Rastafari trod, when one looks at it globally, one sees all these kind of lineages, and they're all quite specific, but they're all incredibly weighty with particular kind of things, right? And I remember also we were thinking, you know, there's this, imagining this moment when there were, one might say there was two liberated territories, you know, in the Pan-African world at one point, you know, in 1940, and that was Fairfield House and His Majesty upstairs, you know, running the affairs there, and then Pinnacle with Leonard Howell in Jamaica, right? And it makes one think very differently about I and I's story when we kind of try and articulate all these threads together. Absolutely. So how does one think about this in terms of the Chod in Britain and the specific place of Rastafari in the more general Chod, when Rastafari in Britain are literally trodding in the footsteps of His Majesty?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, even thinking about joining the dots, because it is from Fairfield House that His Majesty was, you know, in meeting with Dr. Malachi Bayan, across to America, to Harlem, set up the Ethiopian World Federation. Do you know what I mean? Then the dots go on and the domino goes on. And I'm going to say, even with Marcus Garvey, I'm not going to get into the schism that happened there from Marcus's side, but even then, the fulfillment of what Marcus wanted was still fulfilled by His Majesty. Do you know what I mean? In a different iteration, because actually His Majesty playing the long game through the EWF and through even the spirit of Rastafari galvanized the Pan-African spirit, which is exactly what Marcus wanted, but Marcus wanted it straight away, when actually the fulfillment of His Majesty's wisdom it was still fulfilled. Do you know what I mean? So, and I think it's interesting thinking about the role of England and Britain in this conversation, because I think growing up, we call ourselves African Caribbean. Do you know what I mean? In terms of that's the label that we get kind of put on us. And in terms of the Rastafari story, often the common kind of dot that gets joined is, Jamaica, and my family are from Barbados. So that's where the Rastafari movement grew up through Windrush in terms of the post-war, when there was the call for the Caribbeans at that generation to come over to Britain, came the Caribbeans then into Britain, and then the Rastafari movement grew up from the second generations of the Rastafari generation in the 1970s and 80s. And I was born in 1972, so our conversation was always through Caribbean, then into Britain in that way through Rastafari. And you know what I mean? And that's the conversation. But actually, what that misses out is actually England was playing a role in this conversation before Windrush in the 1930s, with His Majesty positioned in the city of Bath. Do you know what I mean? And so there's a very significant part of the jigsaw that would always be missing, and it's not unconnected. So yeah, I think it's really crucial.
And what and like my sense of it is that EWF and the Tewahedo Church play a much more central role in the Rastafari trod in Britain than possibly in other places. I don't know what they might think about that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the EWF always been strong. I mean, as they say themselves, they're not a mansion of Rastafari, but they are obviously closely in the movement, and the leaders of the mansions are also very active within the EWFs, and also the Ethiopian Orthodox Church as well. You know, in terms of Fairfield House, I think again I want to bring it back to Fairfield House. Often this is where ones and ones are kind of gravitating towards in order to see what's happening. So Fairfield House is not only a site of extreme pilgrimage for Rastafari worldwide, it's also a site of pilgrimage for the Ethiopian community, who also cite His Majesty with utmost respect and honor. They cite His Majesty differently to Rastafari, and that's obviously understandable. You understand, they've got their tradition, their culture, but still, they really do respect His Majesty and everything that he did for Ethiopia. So they have been playing an integral role in actually that relationship of Rastafari and seeing the links, because for too often Ethiopia, the Ethiopian Orthodox and Rastafari, separate entities and within, repelling in each other's orbit, but actually seeing the communication and the working together of those communities has been really strong. And it's not as binary as often as we would, and similar with the Ethiopian Orthodox.
Yeah. And maybe I can just tell us a bit about that, because it might help to make more sense. So, His Majesty comes back to Bath one more time in 1954, gives Fairfield House to the city. Can I just talk about what that gift was, what happened to it afterwards, and then which were the people, the partners who came together to kind of preserve Fairfield House and what it does today in a very practical way.
Yeah, give thanks. So yeah, after His Majesty left, himself Fairfield House in 1940. Empress Menen continued to live there in 1941, and she returned, and other members of his family continued to live there to 1943. And then after that, it was vacated. It became a children's home for a time during the war, and then it was an older people's home in the post-war period. His Majesty himself, he left the property of Fairfield House to the city of Bath. It's called the Corporation of Bath at that time. And as it says in the deeds, a home for the aged citizens of Bath, for the older people of Bath. So it was given to City of Bath as a gift. And then it would then use, as I say, for as an older people's home. Then it laid empty for quite a while, and then BEMSCA, which is the Bath Ethnic Minority Senior Citizens Association. It's a bit of a long name, but BEMSCA. So they deal with particularly care for the aged Caribbean and also Asian elders in Bath. It's being run now by Pauline Swaby, and it's been going now for, I think it's about 30. Is it 30 years or 32 years? But it's a good strong while. It's been based at Fairfield House for about 30 years. And when they needed a new premises, the council didn't say, "Oh, go to Fairfield House because that's where the emperor lived." They basically said, "There's an empty building. Maybe you should go there." So they went and checked it out. And lo and behold, it is Fairfield House where the emperor was. So it is a divine synergy that Fairfield House is now occupied by an organization which is very sympathetic, obviously, to the African heritage. So, you know, as it goes on, BEMSCA were there. But then it got to the point where the council themselves, so this is in the early 2011, 2012 kind of time, maybe slightly before that, the council said they want to sell Fairfield House because it's a drain on their resources and they just want to make money, you know, the whole recession and all that kind of thing. So they wanted to sell it off as a private and basically sell it to be turned into flats to private residences and apartments. So myself, Pauline, Rasbandeli, Selassie first come together, just said we can't allow this to happen, broaden the network, you know, Makapi, Selassie and other ones come together to say, look, we have to do something about this. So we formed a committee called the Friends of Fairfield House. We wrote a constitution to say, you know, this is who the Friends of Fairfield House are. We're here to save Fairfield House and that it can't be sold off as private residences. And literally overnight, I built a website. Literally, like it didn't have any public presence at all at that point. So overnight, I got onto WordPress, built a website, and just put the call out. You know what I mean? Like similar to the Evening Front, when I put the thing in the newspaper, shared the link. Please send testimony if you don't want to see Fairfield House, you know, sold off. And this is how the dots join. The first email we received back was from Ras Benjamin Zephaniah saying Fairfield House is too important, etc., etc. And then we had a flood of comments that we put on the blog, on the website, and then we sent that to the council to say, look at that. There's no way you could sell this off because this is too important. And that was the beginning of this journey of you know, saving the property. So on Friends of Fairfield House were a number of different ones from the community. Importantly, you know, from the Ethiopian community was Kifle, who's an elder within the Ethiopian community in Bristol, and also Ezra, another elder within the Ethiopian community. And that's, you know, the Ethiopian community had been involved in Fairfield House before that time, but this was the first time we all sat together, Rastafari, representatives, Ethiopian representatives, representatives from the council, representatives from the elder community, because the first covenant of the Fairfield House was it for the elders, and also local residents, and sat together. There were 17 of us. And that was the beginning of, like, you know, yeah, we can't let this be lost in our lifetime and on our generation, because this place is too important. It has to be safe for the future generations, really. So that was in about 2013, something, 2012, 2013, something around that time.
And today, how is it used today? What's the state of play now?
So State of Tay today is very active. Ras Benji is the program manager for Fairfield House, and yeah, is very active with every first Saturday of the month. There's a Rastafari Bingi gathering, and all the holy days within Rastafari, 2nd November, 23rd of July, we hold significant, gatherings where ones come from all over the country. 7th of January for Ghana. So all the Rastafari, landmark calendar dates are there, as well as the first Saturday of every month. Then the Ethiopian Orthodox community also use it for their Gena, for Timket, for the New Year, and for Sika, for Easter, and other Ethiopian Orthodox days. And they use it for community days as well. We also hire out for local community, and local organizations hold meetings there, and different things like that. But it's all of a very socially minded, progressive spirit there. Do you know what I mean? So everything that goes on there is just, it's just beautiful. I just say to everyone at the Fairfield House. And also Ras Benji holds historic tours there every, most Sundays. Check the website. And he does and I always joke with Ras Benji about this, because before Ras Benji came, I was doing a lot of these activities. I would do an informal tour, but Ras Benji's kind of turned it into a fine art. Do you know what I mean? And it's like fantastic, the organization that now is there, and it allows older people like me to take a step back. the energy to come in.
Step forward, Shawn, man.
Absolutely.
Bigger things, man.
So I just give thanks for the new energy, and it's important to be in all seriousness. That's really important. I've been involved with Fairfield House since, in a dedicated way, from 1999 through all this time. But it takes a lot. Do you know what I mean? So actually, you have to take a step back sometimes, just for your own health. You know what I mean?
Of course.
And it's important to pass the baton, because you know what I mean. So and that was something that Ras Bandeli realized as well, in terms of the new energies coming up. Really important. So the Ethiopian community, and like you say, the EWF have been very integral. So again, Ras Benji oversaw the renovation during the time of COVID of what we now call the Sacred Garden. So that area was where the chapel was built, because during the Graziani, the really destructive battle during the war, and His Majesty heard that his good close allies and patriarchs and family were being massacred in Ethiopia. He called and said, I need the tabot. I need to be able to pray. I need the chapel at Fairfield. So he called for the tabot to be brought from Jerusalem, and the priest, and you know what I mean. And then they came forward and built the chapel. Chapel's no longer there. It was built to a greenhouse was renovated into a chapel. So Ras Benji and Ras Tinish, who at that point was the president or lead of the EWF, they came together and renovated the Sacred Garden area. And now there's a plaque that talks about that significance. So the EWF very integral, I think, in and the role of Rastafari and the presence of Rastafari extremely active. But like I say, hand in hand also with the Ethiopian community, and that's the way it ever should be. His Majesty, I believe, his heart would be full if he saw how ones and ones are working together rather than working in division. You know what I mean? For
very
me,
important point, man.
When we talk about new Ethiopianism, iteration, and as ones and ones who, from the Caribbean, again, thinking about that transatlantic enslavement story, the pin for us was always West Africa, because Ghana and, where, but actually, we know through the ancient of Africa that there was the travel from the east to the west, even in terms of ones in Africa. Do you know what I mean?
This is super important, right? Because it's really helpful in shifting our sense of the geography of the thing. If we think that Britain was the center of empire, so you had all the independence leaders coming through Britain before the Windrush, that Ethiopia was a central presence in British political life and cultural life as well, for a long time. And so now this Rastafari trod in Britain is a trod that is multifaceted, and it necessarily holds Ethiopia very close in ways, in practical ways, not necessarily just in spiritual ways, but in practical ways, which make quite a it's good to think about. And Mama Walete said to me, you got to remember to talk about the sound systems, Shawn, but maybe Raskos can talk about that, because that's Raskos's a speciality, right? And the important story of the sound systems in Britain and Rastafari, right? But just to finish off this portion now, we was talking about Ethiopianism, new Ethiopianism. The eye back in the day was on WordPress, pioneering. Now the eye is on Instagram and doing these daily reasonings. Tewahedo stuff. Can the eye just tell us a bit about why you're doing that and why it's important?
Okay, yeah. If I may, I'm going to take one step back and then two steps forward, because that's again to join the dots in terms of the role of Ethiopia within that Pan-African story. So, Nelson Mandela talked about in his autobiography how he cited His Majesty as an inspiration, and Ethiopia was always an inspiration. Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, coming up even before he became first president, talked about His Majesty. Jomo Kenyatta talked about His Majesty being inspiration. Do you know what I mean? So His Majesty was inspiration, for many in those early times before even the independence grew. So yeah, absolutely, really crucial. And then in terms of my own trod, if you like, and using these technologies, again, is great to see what you've been doing in the School of Sacrament in terms of using YouTube for these lectures and you know what I mean, and getting that shared. And a recent new journey for me, and it come to me as a surprise in a way, what I'm now doing. I got baptized into Ethiopian Orthodox in 2023, September 2023. I went to Addis Ababa and was baptized and was given the name HaileMarriam, Power of Mary. And so that's been a new journey for me. Do you know what I mean? Learning that trod and the church, and do you know what I mean, navigating that space, and also navigating that relationship between Rastafari and Ethiopia and the spirituality and the theology. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm learning a lot. And about 100, and I say this very deliberately, about 134 days ago. So this was in September, around September the 18th kind of time. And I can be quite impulsive sometimes. Doctor thinks I've got ADHD, and I had the idea of, actually, let me take it back. I bought the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. I bought the Ethiopian Bible, I should say, and I've got many Bibles, as many of us have, and I've got other versions of the Ethiopian Bible. But then I found a new version that I thought, actually, yeah, I want this version. So I bought the Bible, and it just stayed on my desk, and it remained unread. And I just thought, you know what? Why am I buying these things if I'm not reading it? I want to read it. So around September the 18th time, I thought, you know what? I want to read the Bible. Going back to my teachings in the 12 tribes of Israel, Naphtali, Shawn Naphtali. And I read the Bible a chapter a day back in the early 1990s. But in truth, was it really a chapter a day? Because there's days that you miss. There's days when, I'll read it tomorrow. There's gaps. It takes a lot longer than 3 years really to read the Bible, unless you're doing it every day. So I thought, why don't I do this now in the age of TikTok, Instagram? I'm going to hold myself accountable and share the Bible readings. So first and foremost, I'm doing it for myself because I want to read this Ethiopian Bible. So I'm not doing it because I think I'm this great teacher, theologian, or anything like that. I'm doing it because I want to hold myself accountable publicly to read it. So every single day without fail, I have stuck to this, and I've been reading a chapter a day. And I'm now on Numbers chapter 18, I think. today. And it's been a beautiful experience. I read the Bible. I just have my phone set up. I read it. I give a reasoning afterwards. I always keep it to under 15 minutes. And I share it on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And I just put it out there, and sometimes I might do a follow-up reasoning during the day if there's something more I want to say. And I try not to do it in any, there's no music, there's no production. If I trip up words, I leave all of that in there. I just do it as me. Do you know what I mean? No airs and graces or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And it's a beautiful
Full of
journey.
grace, Shawn. You're full of grace, man.
Oh no, but I just want it to be, I'm finding it really nourishing, actually. And even though, like I say, the first time I did it was in the early 90s, but it's such a book that actually to read it again, you get connected, and I'm reading it in a way and connected it in a way that I knew I wasn't back then. So if you think about those chapters in Genesis and in the book of Numbers, which are all genealogy. Do you know what I mean? And they're hard to wade through. Some of those chapters are really difficult. So actually, when you read it by yourself, they're not always that easy to engage in and to really connect with those words. But doing it in a public way and then giving a reasoning afterwards, I'm finding I'm connecting with those chapters in a way that I never had done before, So I'm really enjoying the journey, and there's ones that kind of comment and privately or in the chat, and it's great. So for me, it's going to take me over 4 years to read the Ethiopian version, because as you know, there's more books in the Ethiopian version, 81 books versus the 66 in the King James. But I just want to give God thanks for just allowing me to do this. Is a real privilege, really.
Yes, sir. Thanks. Oh, well, Shawn, you're giving us a lot to think about. And I'm gonna open it up to ones and ones now. Hey, it's Jelani. Yes, the power of Mary. That's right.
Power of Mary. And talking about the power of Mary, that I was speaking with Ezra, who I mentioned earlier. He's the elder Ethiopian, very learned theologian as well, an Ethiopian Orthodox. So I told him about HaileMarriam, power of Mary. And he said, actually, it's the gracious power of Mary, because when that power is connected with Mary, it becomes a gracious power and not just power, kind of. And I thought that was beautiful. Yeah, I mean,
that is, huh? Wow.
So that was really.
All right. Yes, sir. So Jelani, we're opening it up, right?
Yeah, and we must. And, you have been that gracious power of Mary on this Sunday afternoon, my brother. This has been nourishing, You talk about activist scholar. You've demonstrated that has been the fabric that you've been built on, and your works are there to demonstrate the contribution that you've been bringing. You kind of demonstrated also the idea of new Ethiopianism around the convergence of purpose and legacies that have been left by His Majesty, which I would argue is a part of that new Ethiopian method. His Majesty has provided footprints, as you have so clearly identified, but also gifts and legacies. He's provided us with geographies of his own thoughts, which also galvanize us. And, just to hear you talk about how the Ethiopians and the Rastafari, along with local communities, neither Ethiopian or Rastafari, converge in this celebratory way is precisely that which we're trying to hone in on in regard to the new Ethiopianism. Shawn, I'm not sure if you want to just talk briefly, because we are in that 50th anniversary of the revolution, But you know, how the final movements in your mind have kind of given us this contemporary moment, you know. What is it in relation to His Majesty's non-visible presence that's driving persons like yourself, you know, and others to connect in your mind and take it any way you wish?
Yeah, thank you. Wow, that's a great question. Really interesting question. So yeah, the non-visible presence. So yeah, really interesting. So I want to answer this, I guess, in relation to looking forward, you know, Rastafari in the iteration as we know it now, not quite 100 years old yet, in terms of, if you think about, if we're dating it in the modern context from 1930s onwards. So the 100th anniversary of that will be coming up soon. And everything that we've achieved up to this point, you know, there's lots. So His Majesty's inspiration is large with it, you know, as strong as ever, I'd say, within the Rastafari movement. But as we know, the influence of Rastafari itself is also even larger, I'd say, in terms of the music and culture, and you know, the colors and the philosophy and these kind of things. But not everyone that is inspired by Rastafari, who don't call themselves Rastafari, reach those levels of what we see in His Majesty. So we are, but keep that burning, that torch light of His Majesty and the teachings. But as ones and ones, we are come together. There's more scholarship, there's more books being written. Social media and the internet has really kind of helped galvanize. I remember in the early 90s or mid 90s, we had the Rastafari Speaks forum, there was Rasnix, there was a few different sites on the internet. So using these technologies has really, I think, helped energize and bring the Rastafari movement in His Majesty's teachings to the fore. And it's been really beautiful seeing that over generations still in the light. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think as we move towards the 100th anniversary, I know we still have conversations within Rastafari of, should it be this or should it be that, or the Bible, burn Bible, you know, there's lots of, should it be unified, there's lots of stuff. And for me, it's like, you know what, let's focus on, as reasoning was back in the day, reasoning was more about, let's reason about what unites us rather than what divides us. We would find that common unity underpins the reasoning rather than using reasoning for kind of argument. And I think one thing, I guess, a negative thing about how reasoning sometimes happens over the internet is point scoring, going away, doing research, coming back with the point. It's like, no, that's not reasoning. Do you know what I mean? Reasoning was just sitting down in the dust with your brethren and sisterin and just, you know what I mean? Just finding common parlance, common conversation and taking things forward. And is in that spirit, I think, you know, as we move towards the 100th anniversary, to bring that, you know, if you think about what we've achieved as Rastafari in the first 100 years compared to what was happening in the first 100 years of Christianity, which was at that point still quite a fragmented Jewish sect that was still trying to find its feet. It took hundreds of years for some of the tenets of Christianity to come forward. The Trinity, these kind of concepts didn't happen in those early days, didn't happen within the first 100 years of Christianity. You know, if you look at Islam was always military. So that had a very different energies within the first 100 years. Sikhism had clear leadership, but it had the rebellion spirit of Rastafari in terms of, you know, that was anti-caste and other things going on. And within Rastafari, you know, truth, rights and justice and anti-colonialism, anti-racism. And it's got that spirit that I think a lot of the warrior spirit that you do find in also Sikhism. But if you then look at Buddhism, I think, quite similar within Rastafari in terms of not clear leadership in the sense that you see in some of those other kind of faith traditions, but culturally it had a huge spread and had a huge influence that kind of, no matter what the other makeup of the state and religion is Buddhism had, and I think Rastafari is similar to that. We see Rastafari now in every single country in the world has a Rastafari footprint. I went to China in 2008 and I went into this kind of bar. They're playing reggae music. There was a huge red, gold, and green, a picture of His Majesty in the corner. It was the last thing I expected to see. This wasn't planned. It was random. Do you know what I mean? And so I always have to give thanks for that. If I hear Bob Marley on the radio singing Jah, it's like how many other faith movements have that, where you could hear the name of your God and King blasted out on a radio when you're driving a car or something, if it's Radio 1, BBC. Do you know what I mean? We take a lot of these things for granted, but they're powerful and we shouldn't take them for granted. We've made huge strides. So I say, as we come into the 100th year, let's be optimistic as a people, as a nation, not pessimistic, because we've done so many great things in these first 100 years. So may it continue. Sorry for I got on too long.
Rastafari.
In fact, you've really opened the context of the now, because if we think about global happenings, the kind of motivation that you had will not change with what is happening with all of the kind of right-wing governments around the world. The consciousness that Rastafari provides, especially in spaces like your own space, is going to be very important for people. So I really appreciate of what you've said, and I think I see other people trying to get questions in.
Give thanks. Oh, Robbie, shall I go through the chat, or how do you want to field the questions?
Yeah, I can, whilst we're waiting for ones to come forward. Yeah.
Unless anyone wants to just unmute, and that's fine.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Rastafari.
Yes, aye.
Blessed love. Yes, good to be amongst the item, virtually, of course, but love Professor Robbie Shilliam. Yeah, Professor Shawn. Yeah, Jalani Naya, Sister Willety Beresford, and all others engaged with this forum. I want to say that it's a real moment in time, because yeah, Shawn, you gave a really good background to the house and how it's come to where it's come to now. And you mentioned that the house now is a hive of activity. Rastafari, Ethiopians, other nations and nationalities, It's such a moment in time because we know that there was a period when the house was going through very tricky times. And as you mentioned, Shawn, like Sister Willety Medin, Ras Bandeli, Sister Pauline had to come in and do that. So I wanted to kind of come forward to say that it's important that all of us as Rastafari have a focus on that spot, that geographical location, because it's the only place outside of Ethiopia that His Majesty resided in. So I see it as holy grounds myself, So it's a place that all of we need to kind of just have a focus upon. And those of us who can reach there, come and take a look, because the tours that's been mentioned by Shawn, talking about Ras Benji doing these tours, it's quite something, because the brother, Ras Benji goes into some real detail, about His Majesty's time there, and the Empress's time there, and the Holy Family's time there. And you and I remember, Robbie, that when you were doing your research, I remember you brought out some documents showing some of the real nitty-gritty of the runnings of His Majesty, trying to make ends meet and the finances and those things. So it was a very hard time for the king, So to know that he actually left the Bath and then went to Ethiopia 5 years to the day to retake his seat, it's an incredible victory. You know, that we as Rastafari we know each other, been, you know, as a nation, have been celebrating that moment in time, you know. So in terms of where the house is now, I should share with I community. Iman is a board member now. So on the Fairfield board, CIC board, Iman is a member in terms of my expertise in building construction and project management, because the house has gone through a lot of neglect in terms of the building itself, the fabric of the building. So my expertise now on the board through the mystic revelation of the Rastafari, I find myself placed here to be part of that process to bring our expertise to help upgrade the house to modern day compliance standards, you know? So this is where we see the Holy Spirit of Jah just moving through, and the presence of His Majesty in that geographical location is quite something, you know? So, and as has been mentioned, a lot of good work has gone on with Local 3 in particular, remodernizing that former chapel area. Yeah, Local 3 has been quite instrumental in that, you know. So looking forward, I think that we need to, I would suggest, you know, we need to rally our intellectual forces to bring a focus in how we plot the trajectory of Rastafari going forward. And in that plotting of the forward trajectory, I would suggest that Fairfield House is an important component of that, you know? So, yeah, just sharing that vibration with everyone still, you know? Rastafari.
It's good that you're on the board, Rascals. It's a blessing.
Yes,
The architect, yes, sir. Rastafari.
Bless him. Yeah, give thanks. Yeah, ones like Rascals, who has been there, like you say, for when you were there, even Robbie, and then having those new energies on the board. Because I should explain, we had the Friends of Fairfield House, which was a non-legal incorporated body, unincorporated body as it was called. So that was the 17 people. But then as the ambition started to get bigger and the conversations more serious and more kind of legal responsibility, we then had to turn that non-legal entity into a legal entity. So by that, we then formed Fairfield House Bath Community Interest Company. So that involved, obviously, you know, signing documents, we had a bank account previously, but a more legal entity. So it's Friends of Fairfield House, CIC. They are now the current custodians of Fairfield House and the management entity. So the Friends of Fairfield House grew into the CIC, and yeah, so that's what Rascals is now on the board of that. So it's powerful, you know what I mean? And it really has, yeah, the evolution of the works has been, yeah, just beautiful to be a part of, and also now to witness. You know, I don't make any secret of it. I had a heart attack in 2023, so I had to take a step back from some things. So it was in 2023, in the middle of that year, when I just said to Fairfield, you know what, I've paid my dues, and I need to take a bit of a step back now. And you know, I mean, for new ones to come forward is essential. It's essential. Yeah.
Give thanks, sorry. Give thanks. I know Ras Benji is here, but we mentioned Ras Benji's name a few times. Ras Benji, is the eye there? Was he? I thought I saw Ras Benji. Am I?
Yeah, he's there. Maybe he's not close to the mic, but he's definitely.
Okay. All right.
Greetings. I'm just on the way home from Fairfield House, so I've pulled over for a second. So maybe
Okay, was he actually doing the actual works right now?
from the actual works, but we were tuned in as we were closing the house. So we give thanks for upful reasoning. And when I'm home, if you're still going, I'll give a little word sound.
Yes,
so blessed love.
Rastafari. Right, man. This UK community just does the works, right? It's just working. Right.
Well, you know, Robbie, it's interesting. I think Professor Sobers kind of mentioned it as well, that even in the earliest expression of interest in His Majesty and all of that, we underrate how it is that his time in the UK kind of created that interest in him that I think somehow we picked up and carried in the way that we did. And I'm not saying that there wasn't Howell and all of that, but I think that UK time, coming back to what you said about the UK community, you know, I've noticed the conversation around Amharic, the involvement of the World Federation. There seems to be a kind of systematic understanding of issues related to repatriation, the way that community is now present in Shashamani. So I think that the presence of the church there, I don't know what is the connection of St. Agnes Place in all of this, but so the UK, we can't underrate the probably symbolic and future role expected from the UK. In fact, that's, I think, part of what a kind of Jamaican-centric view of Rastafari does. You kind of look at Jamaica as everything Rastafari, without recognizing that there is legitimacy from so many other places, and real serious works going on in so many other places that don't take anything away from us here, if not really supports the indelible growth of the movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that it hits on a really crucial thing. I think actually, when you think about His Majesty is the central focus of the reasoning. Even, you know, if you think about, you can't. How do I explain this? So, in October last year, for Black History Month, but it's also part of a festival that set up in Bath called the Freedom of the City Festival, which I'll talk about maybe a bit later. But we had an event in Bristol, and believe it or not, it was commissioned and supported by the kind of Ministry of Defence. I can't remember. There's a particular organization. I can't remember what it is now, but it's basically the Ministry of Defence interest organization in Britain. The name will come to me. Ras Benji, if we're there, put the name in, or Rascals. But so His Majesty was the patron of this particular organization when he was here. And everyone's like, what? His Majesty was patron of this British military kind of civil organization kind of thing, support organization. And so we had this big event, and it had civic leaders, you know, Rastafari. I was on the panel, Ras Benji was on the panel, and a few other people. But what was really clear, it wasn't and what I have to say is, in response to, it wasn't a Rastafari event. It was a Haile Selassie event. In the room, there were people from all stripes, the city council, mayor, and all, you know, as well as Rastafari. And it was, but all hailing up His Majesty in terms of the importance, the significance, you know, in terms of being that the Ethiopian narratives being written out of the Second World War narrative. Actually, Ethiopia was the first country to be liberated in the Second World War. It gets written out of that. So here you would have the leader of this organization that I still can't quite remember the name of, giving the speech about Haile Selassie. And it was very clearly a Haile Selassie event, not a and one of the things I said at that event is that I really hope this shows you that you don't have to be Rasta to appreciate His Majesty. Do you know what I mean? That all people can appreciate what His Majesty's done, but actually, because they're put off by the, you know, if they don't check for Rastafari, they immediately close down the conversation. But actually, you can appreciate what His Majesty's done, even if you don't check for the Rastafari movement. Do you know what I mean? And this woman came up to me that I've known for a long time, and black woman, black Jamaican heritage woman, but you know, she's not Rasta, didn't really check for it. But she said, thank you for saying that, because she said, I've never realized that before. But she said, hearing all the things that I heard today, I suddenly realized, yes, I can have love for His Majesty and hail him up without having to be a Rasta. Do you know what I mean? And so a lot of those sort of things happen through Fairfield as well. We have a lot of events that only white English people are at, not by our own selection process, like we've organized the event. But
what's the Ethiopian Society? What's it called again? I've forgotten, man. The
Oh, Anglo-Ethiopian Society.
Anglo-Ethiopian.
Yeah, exactly. So most of the membership of Anglo-Ethiopian Society are aged English people, but they're talking about His Majesty in a way that you only really hear Rastafari talking about. And I think, you know, and again, coming up to this 100th is important that actually, yeah, that knowledge is shared. It's not just the love. His Majesty is loved in many circles. Rastafari holds the torch, but it goes far broader than we even realize half the time, really. I see Rashumba has got his hand up there. Give thanks, blessed love.
HaileMarriam.
Blessed love.
Thank you for having this wondrous ceremony today. My name is Rashumba Jokakumba, which means the lion has come back home. Ones on ones know me as Floyd Jarvis. I'm a member of EWF Local 12. I'm also the New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision Rastafarian chaplain. And give thanks, brother Jelani, for saying what you said about sort of decentralizing Rasta today from Jamaica and making it more global. When I say that, as a Guyanese, it's taken with a grain of salt, and you know we bun salt. You understand? So for a yard man to say that, it's a bit more significant and a bit more powerful. So dealing with the incarcerated population, a lot of ones on ones have been down a very long time, and when you make an attempt to introduce, and this is not even new doctrines, not even new teachings. I'm talking about specifically the likes of Grover Redding, James Webb. I don't know if you're familiar with Carlos Cooks's speech, Ross and the Cast. Have you ever heard it? So in Carlos Cooks's speech, Ross and the Cast, he mentions three men from Harlem: Ross the killer, Ross the murderer, and Ross the assassin, who would speak out against Italian occupation. But who were these men? They were up here, but they're not written about. You have to do some unconventional type of research to get the truth about these ones on ones. So when I bring it to them, it's not they don't cleave to it as Charles Price said, cleave to the black, right? They don't cleave to it. They just take it as like secondary. You could bring her. This is my baby girl, my daughter. They don't cleave to it automatically because they're not Jamaican. They're American. You understand? But in 1920, Grover Redding, as we know, he burnt the United States flag, and he pledged allegiance to the Ethiopian flag. And he also said, if you Google it, on his he was hung for this crime, alleged crime. He was hung for this. And if you Google it, the famous words of persons on death row, you will find Grover C. Redding. And you know what his famous words were? I don't know if you know, but his famous words were, "I have something to say, but not at this time. I have and then they hung him. He gave up the ghost. So I asked my congregation, what could it have been that he had to say after hoisting the Eights Gold and Green, burned the American flag? He was walking around. This is 1920, after the race riots of the Red Summer in 1919. You can look up the U.S. Library of Congress. They have all of this going down in Chicago. He was walking around with pictures of then Rastafari, burned the American flag, pledged allegiance to Ethiopia. So what could he possibly have had to say that he could not say in 1920? And then my congregation has been down for how long? 20, 30, 40 years, they say. They know what he could have said. They just smile like everyone is smiling. They're like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that. They don't know it because it's suppressed. This type of history is suppressed. And right now, in 2024, we need to push these movements, because when I tell this to my congregation, the brothers from Buffalo, Rochester, North Carolina, they're more susceptible. Like, oh, I never knew this. I didn't know this. This is why we need to be more open and not singular in the Rasta origin story. Give thanks.
Yeah, give thanks, blessed. Yeah, and I relate. I'm from a child of Barbados. His Majesty came to Barbados in 1966. Same time he came to Jamaica, and it had a huge impact there. Those stories still haven't been told. Obviously, he went to Trinidad as well. There's huge amounts of history that still haven't been told in this history, our story. Sister Danielle, she's another sister in family of Fairfield House. In the chat, she's put the British Legion, the Royal British Legion, is the organization that I couldn't remember. So yeah, give thanks, Sister Danielle, for that.
And I just wanted to say to Rashumba that we in this space, we do want to do some work in the prison conversation. There are a number of narratives written by Rastafari. There's a brethren who was in prison for like 40 odd years, who's recently come out with a book. So I'm saying that we do want to raise the conversation about Rastafari and the prison system and how it offers any kind of space. There are members in our community who work in that space, people like Queen Mother Moses and others.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you're here in this moment.
You're talking about Gilly, Ras Michael Heron.
Precisely.
Yes. I link with him and Queen Mother. So yes.
All right, give thanks. So our conversation is to continue, is really what we're saying. Yeah, give thanks for that.
That's good. Good.
Oh, that's deep, man. I'm just putting these things together. That's very deep, man.
Yeah.
Russian, these multiple, like the roots are always multiple, right?
Well,
you never have one root. There's always a number of roots that are coming together, huh?
I saw where Dominic shared the footprints of His Majesty video in the chat. For those of you here who might not know that film, is there as a resource, and a very good one as well. Shawn has done a number of films. It's quite prolific in that space. And I see where you've started, what do you call it? A photographic kind of, I saw in one of your web spaces that you're now just taking pictures and sharing them as narratives, and suggesting that people, share this kind of work. You want to say a little about the way you work? Because I think that is really a method that many of us could benefit from in that way.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, yeah, first and foremost, as a photographer, filmmaker, that's often been my medium of communication, you know what I mean? And then into writing. I had a book published last year. So I tried to work in whatever spirit I feel like the story wants to go in. When it comes to visual, I did a series a few years ago now called what was it called? Like Everyday Red, Gold, and Green, or green is basically looking at green, gold, and red, the Ethiopian banner in everyday life, and this idea of everyday spirituality, every moment spirituality, is not something that we just do on a Saturday or bingy, is with us every second of the day. So whenever I was walking around, just going to wherever, and I saw the colors, Ice, gold, and green together in some iteration, I would take a photograph of it, and it added to this collection. So it might be like a red car, a yellow poster, and I mean something else. But there were red, gold, and green within the same frame, and I would take a picture, and it just tunes your mind into looking for looking for the liberty in the everyday kind of thing. I'm doing one at the moment called Visual Liturgy, which is more connected with, I guess, Ethiopian Orthodox kind of tradition, and thinking about the Trinity and the split, you know, the image is split up into a triptych, into three. And I'm thinking about, you know, different elements, thinking about the Trinity, Selassie, that name, and what different connections of three exists within a frame. And yeah, so it's kind of visual plays to get us always thinking and connected, and using photography as a way to connect. I'm about to start making a film about Blatangera Harai, which was the Ethiopian foreign minister. Sister Danielle's in the chat. I haven't actually. Sister Danielle, I'm asking you to be in it, so I'm going to be hitting you up soon to organize a filming day. But I want that to be VR, virtual reality. You know, where you have the film and you can move it around in the screen, so it's like a 360-degree. So it's going to be a virtual reality film that's going to be based in Fairfield House, but also at other spaces related to Blatangera Harai, because yeah, he's a very important figure. He's the Ethiopian foreign minister. He was the emperor's close friend, best friend, closest advisor during those really difficult years. He did enough trods with His Majesty. He sadly died in 1938 at Fairfield House. But this man was a scholar. He wrote huge amount of books. He told the Ethiopian story, you know, very influential as a scholar in his own right. And it's important that names like that get remembered. Do you know what I mean? So I've done a lot of work in the past. I help renovate, get fundraising to renovate his grave, and you know, there's lots of stuff that I've done personally in relation to Blatangera Harai. But now I feels the time to make a film to tell that story, you know. And even if you look in the Ilek verses of His Majesty, that book of speeches, the speech that His Majesty gave at the graveside of Blatangera Harai at the funeral is in that book, is in the Ilek verses. So, you know, and that was included in Footsteps of the Emperor. But the interesting thing is that was just 1 minute 20 of Footsteps of the Emperor of a 60-minute film. But now that's taken on a life of its own. The reason I was in Ethiopia in 2023 was because of Blatangera Harai, because he was being reburied. So in Holy Trinity Church, His Majesty's church. So I was invited to Ethiopia to speak at the reburial. You know, there was lots of different, but that was like I guess a tangent story that's now got a life of its own in a way. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. So that's my next works, is making a film about Blatangera Harai.
So I think we have some things to talk about, even more so, given that last project that you mentioned. But it seems as though we could also, I'm thinking as a SOSACRU, do a kind of a festival of your films, because there's enough certainly for people to get a sense of, you know, what it is that the work represents as far as different aspects of our journey. And, you know, what is interesting is that you seem to be perfect for now. If I think about the students, our students now are not motivated by the same kind of assignments that we would give them in the past, where, you know, they have to write an essay and, you know, so yeah. The kind of media-driven sort of active engagement that you've always been at, I'm sure is really very inspirational for your students. Robbie, I'm not sure how much I know there is. I see a hand. I'm going to turn over to you to wrap, and then I'll
so there's a couple more.
There's 2 hands. Yeah.
Okay. So please go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, Warrior. Then Makapi, Ras Makapi, Warrior.
Yes, I
Warrior.
Yeah, man. I'm
Warrior.
Yes,
yes, Makapi.
Yeah, look, Shawn. Each and everyone, Jalani. Too much name to mention. All of the SOSACRU crew. Yes. New Ethiopianism. I'll pass on that. I have 2 questions. How does the eye see the Rastafari? See the state of Rastafari in the UK at the moment. Yeah, and also does I see that Rastafari in the UK can unite and I come together, etc.
Yeah. No, give thanks, give thanks. Yeah, the state of the Rastafari in the UK. I mean, it's the movement and the energy is still there, but I think there is on a positive, I think that the ones that are faithful and true and energized are as energized and faithful and true as ever. And there is, I think, still that energy that is still organizing. I think yesterday, was the Nyabingi Council meeting. Unfortunately, I couldn't go to it. I'd be really interested to hear what happened there. I think there is a need for more, I guess, communication. I'll put it that way. We are on social media, but I think lots of the some of the organizations or some of the things happening aren't sort of advertised as in a broader way as it could be, because I think there could be more of a alignment to getting more ones and ones there. But I think within our own pockets of communities, I think things are happening. But I would like to see more communication between, the 12 tribes in Nyabingi and this, that, and the other coming together. But that leads to the idea of unity, because I think there's a double-edged sword whenever we talk about coming together and unify. Because from my experience, whenever we talk about, we have to come together, we got to unify, it can often have the adverse reason and split off more. We a new organization gets set up to unify, which then just all that does is splinters more because a new organization's been set up. So I think part of, as we move towards the 100th year, is actually to have some confidence and in the fact that we are 12 tribes exist, Nyabingi exists, Bubites exists, and non-aligned Rasta exists, and actually to have confidence that that's fine. Within every movement, liberty, faith movement, whatever you want to, how you ever describe it, there always will be different kind of, groups and camps and denominations. And I don't necessarily see that as a negative thing, because often if we try to get everyone to think in exactly the same way, that can have its negative repercussions as well, because people resist it, and then you have leaders, and it gets really difficult. So I think a confidence in difference, but uniting under what is core, that unites us. I think for me, that's the spirit, rather than trying to get everyone to think in one way, in one mansion or whatever. I would definitely like to see a kind of a national coming together. I think that would be a beautiful thing to say, look, forget the banners, forget the writs and rights, just come together under the spirit of Rastafari, and let's have a summit or whatever. I'd like to see that. Maybe it's a summit that travels around the country. There's a Liverpool one, a Manchester one, a Birmingham one, a Bristol one, something like that. Or might be central, might be somewhere in the Midlands that everyone can kind of come together, in Leicester or somewhere like that. Do you know what I mean? So for me, there's lots of positivities, and I'm usually an upful person. There's lots of positivities that we shouldn't take for granted, but I think there are some bridges that can happen to bring ones and ones together, to then think about, the next 100 years, where do we want to be? Because we are the custodians of these first 100 years. Whether we accept that mantle or not, we are. Do you know what I mean? So how do we want this story to be told now? How do we want to pass the baton on to the next generation coming forward as well? So hopefully that made sense, Brother McCarthy. And I know you do. Well, I was thinking about you actually when they're talking about the prisons and the work that you do in the prisons, and you've had a real strong legacy in the works that you do. So respect due to you as well.
Ras Kaimo is in the queue there.
Give thanks, my brother. This is a wonderful reasoning we've had here, and I give thanks for hearing your voice for the first time, at least for myself. I give thanks for some of the different faces I'm seeing and the different ones that have come in. I'm resonating with the theme, one of the themes I'm feeling from the eye, which is the different places that His Majesty has given us, Fairfield House being one of those. But His Majesty, I feel, has also given us points in space, and he's given us points in time. It was my good fortune, although I did not know it at the time, to first go to Jamaica in 1980 I was doing my doctoral dissertation field work. I'm an anthropologist like the eye. And I knew nothing of Rastafari. I knew there was somebody called Bob Marley. I didn't know anything about Haile Selassie. But it was the amazing fortune that the movement was celebrating its golden jubilee in that year. And I not only came to move with the Nyabingi House across that year and all of the Bingi celebrations up to the Golden Jubilee. And then that gave me contact with many brethren and sistren who were coming in from foreign, and I was getting a sense of the international dimensions of the movement as it was beginning to manifest and assert itself. And I didn't even mean to tell this little story here, because that's my real point was to ask the eye a question about the timing of your film on Fairfield House, because I'm wondering what the proximity of the film was in time to the centenary. And I'm sure that the eye knows that Rastafari were involved in the film The Emperor's Birthday that was done by a man named John Dollar, who years later I met here in Washington, D.C. And he described to me the making of the film. And he had initially been working with Ras Tesfa Tafari, who's Ras Ivai's and Ras Ibo's brother. So I'm wondering if the centenary gave any energy, because from your own biography, you're talking about how you're sighting up in 89 and 90. You're sighting up on the cusp of the centenary. I'm wondering if the centenary gave any energy to the eye's career in filmmaking and what I did with Fairfield House.
Yeah, interesting. And give thanks for that. Give thanks for the sharing, and also another fellow brother anthropologist as well. We get to connect on that levels as well. So I would say indirectly rather than directly in terms of the centenary. And the reason I say indirectly, so it wouldn't have been a conscious thing at that point in 1999 when I was making the film. But for me as an individual, absolutely an inspiration from seeing films like The Emperor's Birthday, from seeing TV programs like the Liberator about Seymour MacLean. And I went to university, went to film school in 1993. And without being too long-winded, when I left school at 15. Yeah, very few exams, didn't do well at school. And I applied for like a media studies course, and I got rejected. And then I worked for 2 years in very toxic, racist environments. One as a panel beater, knocking dents out of cars, really toxic environments. This is late 80s. And then worked for a year, strip and paint off furniture and things like that. And there's got to be more to life than this. But during that time, so this is early 90s now I'm talking about, what happened to me during that early 90s was more of a sense of self. I don't know if you know about Soul to Soul, the Black British music, sort of soul R&B kind of group. They brought to Britain a real Black British pride and sense of identity. They grew their hair in dreadlocks, and it was real. Do you know what I mean? It was a real moment within Black popular culture within Britain. There was conscious hip hop, KRS-One and Public Enemy, growing up during that time. I'm a child of that era. And then in line with that, you had, Chuck D talking about Louis Farrakhan. I'm reading all that kind of stuff. Then I'm watching things like The Emperor's Birthday and, reading then about Bob Marley, Catch a Fire, biography about Bob Marley. So I'm consuming all of that type of books and media in the early 90s. So by the time I reapplied to go to that media college again, the one that rejected me, I reapplied 2 years later and they accepted me. And the reason why they accepted me then by the same person who rejected me is because my portfolio all of a sudden had a purpose. I was talking about Black liberation. I was talking about identity. I was talking about Rastafari. None of that was 2 years before that. When I first applied, I had sunsets and, you know what I mean? Just picturesque stuff in my portfolio. But it came back with an energy and a sense of self. So that's why I say very directly and indirectly, it influenced me. I wouldn't say like the centenary directly, but definitely indirectly, because during that time I got to know myself more. And then by the time I then got to university, I didn't look back. And I was kind of on it then in terms of wanting to make films about I and Black history, etc., etc. So thank you for allowing me to join those dots as well, because that's exactly what was going on at that time for me in those early 90s.
Yes,
in fact, Shawn, you left the juicy part of the story inspirationally out, that people are not looking at someone who plotted himself to be in front of us like this, but you've actually earned your way there with different paths, nicely, very much so. But I'm not sure if there are any further. Is there?
There's Pom J. I don't know the I's full name, but Pom J's got hand up for a long time.
Yes, please.
Yes, greetings to all of I worldwide. First of all, I just like to give thanks for the reasoning, and I give thanks for all the ones that had some powerful reasonings to block. I'm originally from Liberia. Been in this country in America for over 33 years now. I'm coming to the eye with this question in general because I've always been studying Rastafari for a very long time as a youth, but coming from where I come from in Liberia, there is not much ones that know too much about Rastafari. And I know for a fact with the research and the reasons I've done in times in the past, I've seen that His Majesty has not only welcomed President William Shadrach Tubman, but also William Tubman in the historic times. And I'm just so, it makes me a little upset because my country in general don't know too much about His Majesty on a more bigger, broader perspective. They look at me like I'm following. I'm the only one, first of all, let me say it like this. I'm the only one in my family in the greater Liberian context that I know that follow His Majesty the way I follow His Majesty. So I'm just curious if I have any type of literature that I can recommend or know of that is out there about even the meeting with both of the presidents, William Shadrach Tubman and also William Tubman. If I can basically share that or give me a way I can share that information with some of the greater Liberian community, because it just intrigues me to find that they think that I follow like they literally think I worship the devil, like no lie. When they see me, they say, oh, this is the guy that he's the only one who follow this thing that he calls whatever. And I'm like, I don't get it, why they feel and think this way when we have two different presidents in our country that was embraced by His Majesty, but I don't see much literature out there. So I just want to reason with it, and hopefully I can point me in the of that information. And I also want to say my acronym, Princeton Oluwale Martin Jr., is basically POMJ, but Oluwale, which means the great one, the king has come. It's a Nigeria Yoruba name because I have a lineage in Nigeria as well. But I feel like I'm probably that one. I'm one of those ones that's supposed to come and show them the way and make them see that his Imperial Majesty was who everybody say he is and needs to be recognized and held the way he's held. So if y'all can just give me any reasoning on literature that I can share with my people at large, I will give thanks for that.
Yeah, give thanks, give thanks. No,
I
that's
want to
powerful.
ask you to put your contact details in the chat as well, so that we can reach you.
Yeah,
The brother, I want to ask you to put your details, your email and contact in our chat so we can reach out to you. Jimmy Cliff, I'm seeing on social media, just arrived in Liberia a couple of days ago to an interesting welcome. But yeah, please, Prof, go ahead.
I mean, even on this point, I don't know if it's related, but Ras Benji, who's a Rastafari historian, has got his hand up. So Ras Benji, if you've got an answer to this as well, feel free to unmute, because I know Ras Benji would have some words on this as well. Done a huge amount of research on His Majesty's. So I'm going to give way to Ras Benji, as I believe I'm reading your mind, and I hope this is what you're coming in. But actually, before you come in, Ras Benji, what I will say is to my brother, give thanks for that. Because I think the thing that gets left out the equation often, even I said it earlier, Ethiopia, the only country that wasn't colonized, but Liberia also shares that. Obviously, it has a different history and connection with the United States, etc. But Liberia gets left out of that conversation. So it's important to join those dots as well. But yeah, Ras Benji.
Yeah, greetings everyone in the name of His Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I. And give thanks for that question, that point there, because it allows me to address something in that what Professor Sobers has done at Fairfield House, especially that work Footsteps of the Emperor, it is landmark because it's us being open and giving somewhere to collect those memories and that same problem that you're faced with in Liberia. We're also still in that challenge today to get people to understand who His Majesty is, to get him to understand why it's important. And what was really special about this time that we're living in now, and this is an urgent message to everyone in all parts, in all parts of the world, these memories have to be collected now. And this is the time when the finger is pointing at us, you know? If we let this slide by, in 2 years' time, it's the 60th anniversary of His Majesty's visit to the Caribbean. There needs to be major collaboration between institutions to collect these memories, to do outreach, to actually have a tour or to organize events in places that the Emperor visited, because that's what we're trying to do in the city of Bath. And when we get the opportunity, yes, we'll do it in London, we'll do it in Oxford, we'll do it in any place that we're called to, where we're informed about. But the groundwork for finding out His Majesty, you know, for example, was involved with the British Legion in Bristol. It's about that primary or secondary research area, which is in the newspapers, which is first, yes, the oral history, but then you're going into the newspapers, you're going into the accounts of the time, you're going into what was written, you're going into the photographic records. So you might find there's books about the emperor in the foreign press that were published in Ethiopia. And so there might be those connections that you find in there. And this last year at Fairfield House, we launched a new exhibition in our interpretation room leading to the museum. And that's about the emperor's world travels from 1924 to 1974. So we've almost made ourselves also a repository for those stories. And people can come, and if you can prove that the emperor went to your country and a particular date, we chart it on the map. And we also would collect photos and things like that of that time, you know, to be able to tell a story, because as Fairfield House is, as it's already been said, is the representative of His Majesty outside of Ethiopia for the whole world. So that's us embracing that global story. But we also want to encourage people all across the world to follow in Fairfield House's wake in their own communities and to do that groundwork. But we're the ones now picking up the heritage and, you know, have to champion the heritage. So it's important heritage if the emperor you know, gave something to a little boy in Jamaica, and that story needs to be recorded somewhere. Where's that artifact? Could be a future museum item. You know, these sorts of things, it's on us to make that happen. So any way that Fairfield House could support, you know, it will maybe take a little bit of research or different things, but we could help support you know, point you in the right direction with a few different resources to arm you. And maybe a model we're offering, perhaps, if you studied what Fairfield House has done, because we're still collecting those memories today. And last year, I interviewed quite a number of 90-year-olds that were 10-year-olds when the emperor was in Bath in the 1930s. So those memories are still out there. They're not as mature memories as Shawn was collecting 25 years ago from an older generation, but they're the view of the emperor through the eyes of children. And that's so important. And it's our last chance to do that in Bath about the 1930s. We've got a little bit longer about the 1950s, and then it's over. But also with Rastafari involvement at Fairfield House, we've been interviewing Rastafari elders for a long time. That's a tradition. And just generally interviewing elders at Fairfield House is an important part of the elderly life of the house. And at a celebration that Ethiopian World Federation Local 3 were instrumental at the opening of the Sacred Garden, working with Fairfield House, working with our volunteers there. An elder said to me, I was here in 1972 for the Emperor's return to Britain, and we were chanting in the garden, and we thought that he was going to come to Fairfield House, so we were waiting for him in that time. You know, that's amazing testimony. That means that 54, 55 years, Rastafari have been in that space at Fairfield House. That's our history in this modern time to record. It's an important testimony. Ezra, who Shawn mentions, he's the most elderly Ethiopian person in the Bath community, and he moved there in the late 50s, and he can remember the greenhouse chapel, Sedetin Yom Medhani Alem. He can actually describe it, how it looked. He stood outside this chapel, you know, critical testimony for the future generations, and it's only here now. So an important message worldwide, and however we can do to support, you know, we'll look up in the records, see if we've got anything on Liberia.
Yeah, give thanks, Ras Benji. Blessed love, respect every time. And I just want to say to the brother as well, that you've taught me something. I've never had to think about His Majesty connecting with the Liberian president. See what I mean? It's not something that's come within my context. So you've taught me that. So if you could teach me that within 2 sentences, imagine what more you know. Don't take for granted what you know. You already know a lot of knowledge that's teaching other people. Do you know what I mean? So it sounds very simple, but it's not. If you can't find the book, then start to research to write the book. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I used to look to Ras Bandeli, and I used to say, I said the story earlier, you know, am I the person to do this? I'm not an elder. And he's just like, just do it. You've got the platform, do it. So all powers to you. And Ras Benji's absolutely a person that can help you, but don't underestimate what you already know or what you can find. But don't wait for permission, and don't wait for a book to arrive, because it probably doesn't exist, but the knowledge is within you already. So I hope that gives a bit of confidence, even though I can't answer your question, if that makes sense.
Everything work in divine order, because we really wanted to hear as well from Ras Benji, who was able to tell us a little about some of the work he does there at Fairfield, and how it can be extended by our own contributions. I see where someone put in the chat match came to Malawi. So people are already helping to infuse that sort of updated information. If there are no more urgent questions,
my brother just wants to come back quickly, I think, just on that final point.
Yes, I give thanks. Just 1 more second. I just want to say, first of all, I didn't recognize that Ras Benji was on a YouTube a page that I reviewed from a brethren that was shooting a video on the Bath, and I just wanted to give the guy massive respect, because when I watched that thing, that was one of the best reaccounts I've ever heard of His Majesty's just knowledge and information. So I just want to big up the eye, Ras Benji. That video that I saw of the eye, just even some serious testimony of His Majesty was just, it was eyeful. I give thanks. Just wanted to recognize the eye, to let the eye know I seen that on YouTube as one of the best I've seen. Just give thanks for that.
Yeah, give thanks. So that is the historical guided tour, and it's always being updated, and it's delivered by other people as well. But we update it with the most recent research and the accounts that have been collected over the years. So a big part of Shawn's documentary is a lady called Ruth Haskins. She was the nanny of the Ethiopian royal family. Still today, I've been talking about her all day long. And her stories in the house, we press buttons and her stories play. So it's something for people to experience. And I recently got back from Ethiopia, and I had the privilege, of being shown a lot of the new heritage that old heritage that they're reopening, the emperor's palaces and so forth. But what made me very thankful and very humbled in our mission at Fairfield House is that we all strive to teach and to impart something about the emperor in that space, or to direct, someone, if first time experience, whether for any reason, just to let them know what the space is and, what the emperor went through a little bit there. And that's what's really important, because, you can see all the flashy cars, you can see all these things, but you need to know why he's the King of Kings, like what it actually in his character did he endure, what did he suffer, and that's what we're trying to impart at Fairfield House. And it's a big responsibility, because this is our community stepping up to a heritage in a heritage world, and we're trying to do our bit for the emperor's heritage, his legacy in the city of Bath. So give thanks.
Give thanks. Can we take Empress Barbara Blake Hannah as a final?
We must take Empress Barbara Blake Hannah. Sister Barbara Blake Hannah, give thanks to see that you're here. Please, the floor is yours.
Peace, excuse me, peace, blessings, and love in the name of Emperor Haile Selassie. Yes, my beloved brother Jelani, it is really good to be here. Brother HaileMarriam, it's an honor to meet you. Blessed and beloved love. I just sat in on this conversation, and it's good. I'm so glad that I did. I'm a real Jamaican Rasta. 1972, I came back to Jamaica and started learning how to be a Rasta upon the hills of Warwick with Brother Dougie Mack. And now I'm considered an elder. And all this time I've been in Jamaica, learning Rasta in Jamaica. But this meeting and meetings like this show me the world outside, the Rasta world outside. And it's really lovely to see the growth, to see how Rasta has grown outside and the issues that concern us, where we're coming from and what we would like to be doing. And it's really lovely. This conversation has been very stimulating, because it's all about outside. Here at home, we're concerned with simple little things. This child that didn't get permission to go into that school, very domestic issues. But outside, we're concerned with important issues, the history of Rastafari and the future. How are we celebrating our 100 years of being here? And so much has happened in this 100 years, from being outcast. I was at the Bob Marley celebration on Thursday, a whole day devoted to celebrating this icon of Rastafari by all of us in so many ways, and to see the littlest children singing and loving Rastafari through Bob Marley. It's like my heart swelled, because I'm an elder. I say I'm older than Bob Marley, to tell you exactly. So give thanks and blessings for what you have done here, Brother Jelani, Brother HaileMarriam, all of you, all the speakers, all those who have been present. I am so glad to just share my voice and add my spirit to the love that's been generated here. Perfect love, Rastafari.
Perfect love, and always an honor to see you, Empress Barbara Blake. A big inspiration for me. So yeah, give thanks, a blessing.
Love.
Yeah, man, serious feeling of blessing from the Queen Mother. So we're particularly pleased that you're here. Empress Barbara, and more so pleased that you found the conversation useful for you. I want to recognize, I'm seeing also Mama Eleanor, at least I saw her earlier here. She's one of our elders. We would want to consider her a major part of our direction as far as what we strive to achieve in this space when she's available to us. I see Sister Mitzi as well. Want to give thanks for your presence as well. And others, I don't want to get myself in trouble for not recognizing all in the chat. But it's my task to really thank you, Shawn, for being real, for really taking us on a journey of your own growth and discovery, how it is that your work has grown and continues to grow. You have projects that are very important to all of us lined up. We wish you all the best with those things. We hope you continue to inspire and teach us, which is what you've done today.
Give thanks. It's been a joy and an honor. So yeah, and I would like to connect more with School of Sacrament. You know, when you first launched, I attended some of the events. So it's just a joy to see this continues, and these platforms are just so necessary. And coming back to Brother McCarthy's question earlier about how I cite Rastafari, I do see it going from strength to strength and using these different platforms in different ways to take us on this journey. So any which way we can do the works, you know, we do the work. So give thanks for the inspiration. So blessed love.
Yeah, man. My internet bombed out, but I want to ask our collaborator in the past, but not so often now in the present, Raskos, to seal us up from your location in the UK, kind of strengthen the word sound coming out of that very important Rastafari space that the IDEM have so well represented this afternoon. So Raskos, if you don't mind just sealing us. Raskos?
Rastafari.
Yes,
Jelani, I just want to quickly state, you know what I mean, growing up in the UK, and I used to see Barbara Blake on the TV. So I just want to, you know, say her also in the Midlands, in a Burning Strong, and moved to Jamaica and Rastafari, used to write in the Caribbean Times. I just want to yell up the sis and that's it, Rastafari.
Bless you,
Anna,
bless you.
Anna.
Bless you.
Yeah, man, and Shawn keep up the great work as always.
Yes, sir.
Raskos, sister Barbara Blake looks more wonderful than she did those times when you used to see her on TV.
Yeah,
I love you,
Seriously.
Yeah.
Praise God, praise God.
Give thanks. I'll be seeing the item in due course in June. Jah willing, take a quick flight to Yard and check in on the vibes there, you know. Yeah, but give thanks for the gathering, you know. It's a pleasure, it's an honor always to be amongst Rastafari people, because I is the new consciousness of the world. Good over evil, righteousness over unrighteousness every time. So it's I time now, because we see the world recycling chaos from month to month, from year to year, and we see it all playing out in front of us. You know, Babylon in their downward spiral. So now is the time for us to be confident and rise up and take our rightful place in creation, you know. So on that note, I just want to give thanks and praise to the Most High Jah, Rastafari, and Empress Menen. And by the grace, you know, of his guidance, may we all move forward on this positive trajectory, you know? Yeah, because I is firm, I is strong, I is solid, I is focused. We have differences amongst us, but we know that there's one focus, that is righteousness and a place of peace and tranquility we can all be at rest and the earth can be at rest. So give thanks and praise to everyone, that we can come together. Enough love to see, brother, Robbie and brother Jalani, Ras Mukapi, Shawn, everyone has contributed. More strength and honor. Make and I go from strength to strength. A Luther continue through the name of Rastafari.
Every time. Oh.
Rastafari.
Yes, sir. Yes, Professor Shawn, HaileMarriam Sobers, give thanks. Yeah, man. You've guided a wonderful reasoning, nicely. Elder, blessings.
Blessings. No, give thanks.
Yes, I SOSACRU. I hear the I sound. Yes, I. Yeah, man. Give thanks.
Give thanks.
Anyone has any word on Ras Shango Bako? How is he? I heard that he had been in hospice. I'm not sure how he's doing.
Yes, I can share with him. I went to see him. Would have been about 6 weeks ago now. His wife came to a point where she had to place him in a care home to take care of his needs, But I went to the care home and saw him, and it's a very, very comfortable place for him, His needs are very well looked after. So I haven't heard much since that time, but I keep in touch with his wife, and he seems to be kind of stable at the last time I heard from her, So I would ask everyone to send us strength through the spiritual channels for us still, Rastafari.
Make them know that they're in our thoughts and prayers, please, in this space.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we give thanks for this conversation has developed over a few months where we wanted to do this late last year, but it has happened, I would say, at the right time. Wonderful Black History tribute. We've not intended it as such, but, some real good work, Shawn, and very much on point with the conversation we're trying to have. We see how we can continue to have this conversation as well, which I think is important. There are other aspects that need to be ventilated. The brethren who spoke of Liberia, there are a number of geographies like that if it is that we can help to ferret out information that strengthen various congregations of I, that would be very much so. I see Mama Willeti looking wonderfully poised. You wanted to say something? You don't say nothing since the brethren start to reason. I mean,
thanks, Bongo I.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Oh, it was just a very mighty presentation. Shawn, give thanks for the eye's work, for the eye's research. I sent the eye a private message when the eye blocked on the eye used to be a panel knocker. So that was a joke for the eye and Brother Jakes, that panel knocker, anthropologist, kind of kindred irids, Yes, so give thanks. At one point, I wanted to reason a little bit on Fairfield House and the vibration that ones must feel, when they enter into that space, because being in Ethiopia, sojourning in Ethiopia in Wondogenet and going to His Majesty's home there in Wondogenet. And I remember the feeling that I felt, or going into a Holy Trinity or palace in Ethiopia. So I know that Fairfield House is a very special place. So really, really give thanks to the eye and to Ras Benji for the work and the documentation and sharing that I story, because it was almost lost in I story. When I look at the before and the after photos of Fairfield House, before His Majesty gave it to the city of Bath. and the foliage that had sort of taken over the property and it was in such disrepair. You know, to look at the works that are taking place there now with tours every Sunday, and, you know, the voice of the babysitter or the caretaker. When you press the buttons, you can hear her stories and all of that. It's all very mighty, and it's important that I really preserve I story in this way. You know, as the Rastafari faithful, I are charged with being the keepers of the memories. You know, I hold the remembrance. The genetic memory holds the remembrance, but in contemporary times, I have to really shepherd it forward because, you know, the temple ages and it withers. And if I don't accurately document I story, then, you know, we leave it for others to do. So give thanks for the I's mighty work. You know, big up the Barbados family. Yes, it's all very mighty. And, you know, I'm going to come through to that region, you know, through the powers at some point, and between SOSACRU and IDOR. Yes, and I will definitely link and, you know, do our little part, you know, create our little square in the quilt. So Rastafari, love and honor. Give thanks for all of the ones that came forward to share in this moment. You know, it was indeed a great joy to hear of the work that's taking place. Rastafari, love. Give thanks.
Give thanks for that work.
Haile. Yes, sir. Yes, Mama.
Give thanks.
Everything balanced now, Mama. You see, we needed that. All right.
Going to close the
well,
room.
we're going to see you up, and yeah. So
yes, until such time. Blessed, well, we have quite a few strongs, but I won't see these ones. So blessed Battle of Ottawa, Liberation, Iowa to everyone. Look forward to a presentation coming forward from the Universal Development of Rastafari from IDOR for Battle of Ottawa. Also Portland, Buff Bay, White Rock, Nyabingi at Mama Fire and Papa Fire. And I know, you know, ISIS will be riding up all over England, all over the UK. So looking forward to more liberations in a short time to come. So thanks. Blessed love.
thanks, love. All right. Brother.